Didn't do a vlog today. I suck. I want to experiment with Q&A. That pretty much sums it up. Busy weekend. It is now Sunday evening. I'm winding down. I had a really great weekend off of a super busy week. A lot of stuff going on, both business as well as personal. But I feel like I'm back in a little bit of a routine now, so I'm definitely enjoying that. I'm going to start my Q&A here. So, question number 1. What book do you recommend reading? I went through a very big reading kick, particularly nonfiction. I was trying to read a lot of personal development books. I was trying to read a lot of things that were directly related to areas that I can push myself forward, whether that was in the business world, the personal finance world, my people skills, stuff like that. 2 big ones that pop off of the top of my head. There's a book called A Walk in the Woods by Bill Bryson. It was easily one of my favorite books that I read. There's a guy, Bill Bryson. He travels the world. He writes about his journeys. He does them with his friends. He does them by himself. He does all sorts of crazy stuff on his trips. And basically, he wanted to hike the Appalachian Trail. He wanted to hike the entire thing. The Appalachian Trail is approximately 2,181 miles long. I won't spoil all the details, but it goes over his journey. He was an older guy when he did it. I think he was almost 50 years old at the time. He did it with a long friend of his. And it just goes over kind of the hardships they faced, how much that this trip bonded them and brought them together, and how much it directly impacted his life and pushing himself to experience new things. The other book that I would recommend, if you are looking for something that is going to be a little bit more in-depth on things that you can kind of improve on in your life, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. This was an incredible book. I actually read this a couple times through. It is a little bit difficult to digest the first time you read it. I've gotten quite a bit of information out of this book. I really enjoyed it. It kind of breaks down the reasons why people do things, how to, what to prioritize in your life to make sure that you're moving yourself forward appropriately and to build the best life possible for yourself. Question number Lyndon asks, any recommendations on how to prevent a dog from panicking during thunderstorms? My dog pants nonstop, and I don't know if there's something I can do to help him or not. I have a couple of tips for you. Okay, so anxiety is a super challenging topic. I've dealt with it a lot with this guy right here. A couple of things I look for when I'm dealing with dogs that have anxiety towards storms, anxiety towards noises, things like that, is I look for symptoms of that anxiety first. So most of the time, when I see dogs that have a lot of anxiety, they do one of a couple of things. The first one being they do tons and tons of pacing. They move all around the room, they don't stop moving, they're staying very active. The other thing that I see a lot of dogs do in situations like this is I see tons of whining, I see maybe some barking, things like that, audible noises. So first and foremost, what I like to do is create a very strong stability command. So bed means get onto this object, stay there until I ask you to get up. When a lot of these dogs are pacing around all over the place, they can't sit still, they can't stop. Stability is the hardest thing in the world for them. Their mind is racing. It's going. And that's why their body is trying to keep up with their mind. So if you look at the brain and you look at the body and you look at what each of them are doing, one is always trying to catch up with the other. So when we take anxious dogs and we're working on bed command and we're creating stability, when they're staying stable on that position, their mind is trying to catch up with that. So their mind might still be racing, but it's fighting to get slower a little bit, slower until it gets to a place where the mind is getting stable with the body. If we have a dog that's anxious in different situations, we need to create that stability. We need to create that sense of calmness from the body first so that the mind can slow down with it. A lot of people will tell you to use things like treats and stuff like that to change their association with these different triggers. When the dogs are already in that state of mind where they're incredibly amped up, they're just so spun up, they're so anxious, they're panting, they're whining, stuff like that. They don't want to take food. They have zero interest in it. And unfortunately, when you're working with food, you have a window about this big of time that you can actually begin to even think about using food to counter condition this stuff. I make sure under unstressful events that I have a solid command taught. So whether that's a down stay, whether that's a bed stay, something like that, I know that the dog has a clear understanding of it and has a history of it being reinforced. So there you could use praise, you could use food, something like that. And I know that I have a means of holding the dog accountable for it. So I make sure those 3 things are in place. That's my clarity. From there, I need to override the anxiety of different storms. So in the case of the storm, storm, when the dog starts getting anxious, I know that I can ask a bed command, which is a known command, and from there I have something where I can hold the dog accountable for it. So I would use a remote collar for it. If the dog doesn't get on the bed, I would correct them for it at a level that's motivating enough where it overrides some of that anxiety. It's not as difficult as you would think. A lot of people think, why would I correct my dog when they're anxious? Isn't it going to make it worse? That's not the case at all. We do this all the time with dogs at our facility. It blocks the mental ability for them to get themselves spun up. It blocks that sense of them getting themselves panicked and not being able to slow down. And again, what happens when you get the dog to stay in command or stay in a position, the mind then slowly follows it. Once you create the stability, the mind can't race as fast as it would as if the body were racing as well at that time. Then you could bring in reinforcement. So then you can bring in food or praise or whatever you want in order to help change the dog's association and emotional feelings about that particular trigger. Question 3. I recently moved to LA and my new place is smaller and I no longer have a yard for Ralph. I walk him 3 times a day at least, and I try to keep him entertained in the house, but he won't play with any toys I get him, and I'm worried he is bored, miserable without being able to explore in a yard. Any suggestions for things to try inside? Am I being overly paranoid that he's unhappy? Kelsey, yes, you are being overly paranoid that he's not happy. First off, congrats on the move to LA. That is fantastic. Really happy for you. Couple of things here. So first and foremost, I don't know how long ago it was you moved to LA, but that being said, it takes a while for dogs to really get comfortable in their environments, especially when things change as drastically as they do when you go from living somewhere where your dog has a lot more freedom, a lot more ability to explore, do things like that, to somewhere where they're in a little bit more of an apartment atmosphere. They're relying more heavily on walks and other forms of mental engagement in order to keep them in the right mindset. I don't think that Ralph is miserable. I think that he's just adjusting to things and getting used to stuff. Really fantastic that you're getting him 3 walks a day. I tell everybody that tells me they walk their dog any more than 1 time a day that you already are 10 steps ahead of your average dog owner, because most people don't walk their dogs at all. But yes, you're correct. Exploring in the backyard that you had is very mentally engaging for him. He's checking things out. He's smelling things. He's exploring, just things that dogs typically do. So when we're living in an apartment, we need to find other ways to create that mental stimulation. First and foremost, training. Do lots of training with them. Practice lots of duration work. Practice lots of structured healing with him, which it sounds like you're already doing. That alone will keep him mentally active. Next thing to do, find other ways to fulfill him and create a little bit more of that sense of exploration. So there's a couple of things you could do for this. One is teach him to work for food. It's a little bit more of kind of like an engaging thing with you and him, as opposed to structure and rules and stuff like that. It can be a little bit funner for him and help him loosen up if he is a little nervous or uncomfortable. Learberg.com also has some really fantastic links on teaching random stuff. The other big one when it comes to dogs not playing with toys. If you're leaving toys out all the time, it reduces the value of them. So if you're constantly getting toys and putting them out, they're always up for grabs. So they're less of a special thing for him, even though you're getting new ones and trying to engage him with it. I would recommend taking every single toy that you have for Ralph right now. I would put them all away and find one toy that maybe he has a history of liking. Find one toy that it seems like he's the most interested in. And once a day, I want you to take it out for 10 to 20 minutes, and I want you to try to play with him with it. If it's a rope or something, try and get him to tug with it. If it's a bone, you could kind of play keep away with it, see if you can come and get him to chase it, something like that. But I want you to do that for 1 time a day for about 20 minutes a day. And if he's uninterested in it, immediately put it away and then try again the next day. If he's uninterested in it, immediately put it away and try again the next day. And eventually you're gonna get him a little bit interested in it. And then he's gonna start to realize, wow, I got to play for 10 minutes and then it went away. What's going on? I wanted to play more, why is it going away? And then the next time it comes out, he's gonna have a little bit more drive for it, and so on and so on. So what you're doing is by withholding those toys to being only engaging things, you're gonna increase his drive for that toy, and you're gonna increase the intensity that he has in the play every time that you play with him. So try that. Don't overthink it. He's probably just getting comfortable and getting used to it. As he warms up more, you'll get him a little bit more engaged and stuff. What number is this? Question number 4. What made you start a business? Start your interest in dogs and training? Where do you gain all your knowledge about training? And lastly, any tips on dogs pulling during walks, specifically ones that I could use at the shelter since we don't have e-collars? Thank you. No problem, Lauren. Let's see what we can do to help you out with this. This is actually 3 questions as opposed to 1. You're cheating, Lauren. What made you start a business? Started your interest in dogs and training. I have told this story a couple of times, and unfortunately, I don't have the most interesting one in the world. Like, oh, I had this deep-rooted history in owning dogs, and I always wanted to help them, or I worked at a shelter and volunteered at one, and, this and that, and blah, blah, blah. It really wasn't that. I've never had a dog growing up, but what I did have was an experience of all of my friends having dogs and all of their dogs being incredibly, incredibly misbehaved. That means I would walk into their house, they would be jumping all over me, they would be barking at me, they would be growling at me, they would be doing all sorts of stuff. I even got bit by a dog as a child one time. At the time when I started looking into getting my first dog, the only thought that was rolling through my head at the time was, my dog is not going to be like that. Being the type of personality that I am, anything that I try to do, I try to do it the best that I absolutely can. So I went through 3 different trainers at the time, found things that I liked, found things that I didn't like, and every time that I worked with a trainer, I felt like I kind of hit a plateau. Continued to try to learn on my own. I searched YouTube, I got, connected with all sorts of different people, stuff like that. And I wound up coming across a company on the east side. I started learning a lot of kind of competitive style stuff. I started learning about creating really, really advanced behaviors, stuff like that. It was pretty neat stuff. I got more and more involved in it. I started working there. It wound up really piquing my interest. And unfortunately, the guy that I was working for at the time wasn't around as much as he would have liked to. He had other things going on. The business wasn't something that he really could sustain on his own. So he left with his business. My partner and I decided that would be a good idea to start our own business there. We started Heights Canine LLC, and we had really, really high ambitions. We've moved things forward really well ever since, and that was kind of the history of how I got started in owning a business. Next part of the question, where did I gain all my knowledge about training? This one is 100% due to things that I've talked about before, and that is finding something that you like, emulating it to the best of your abilities. So I found trainers that I really liked. I learned as much as I could about them. I shadowed with them if possible. I talked to them on the phone if possible. I followed their training methods to a T, and I found flaws in them. From there, I would move on to the next one that I thought was good. I would learn about their training system. I would try it out on a handful of dogs. I would learn what worked. I would learn what didn't work. As I moved along that process, and as I started working more with clients, I started finding, I like this, I don't like this. I like this, I don't like this. And I started combining all of this and creating my own personal training program that I use now. I do think that it is fairly unique, and I think that is a lot of the reason why we've had such great success with our clients that a lot of other people haven't been able to have success with. And I think that's 100% due to my ability to be as open as possible about learning different systems, finding one thing good about every single trainer that I've followed, emulating what people do, figuring out what you like and what you don't like, and taking it all, putting it together, and creating something your own and unique. Last part of the question, any tips on dogs pulling during walks, specifically that I could use at the shelter since we don't have e-collars? Is one big technique that I've seen work miracles with dogs that have really bad leash skills or really bad ability to focus. And this is something that I think all shelters can implement. I think it's something that all shelters can do with every single dog that's in their facility that'll incredibly enhance their ability to focus and a lot of the behavioral issues that they see. Forcing thresholds and stopping your dogs from moving towards stimulus. What is the best way to do that? Teach them not to rush through doorways. So what do I mean by that? Let me explain. Most dog trainers out there teach a very, very specific sit and wait at doorways. This is something that I teach with my clients, but I teach something else first that I think really, really helps, and it's something that you don't need any training tools to enforce. I do that by enforcing it with a door. Doorways, thresholds, other dogs seeing on the walk, other people, things like that. Those are all exciting stimulus that dogs see that their natural instinct is to move towards. We want to start teaching to move away from those things. If you could accomplish that with your dog, you've won the golden ticket at that point. Every time you walk through a doorway, I want you to forget sit. I want you forgetting wait. I don't want you giving any verbal commands at all. Walk up to a doorway, put your hand on a door, and look down at your dog and see what they do. There's a very good chance that they are sitting there right at the crack. They're sitting as close to that as they absolutely can. When you go to let them out of the kennel, their nose is probably already poking through the slot right when you go to even put your hand on the lever to open it. So when you go to open that door and they start poking their nose through, I want you to immediately close it as firmly as you can. The dog will probably jump back. Whoa! What the heck? What was that? That door just Closed. It was open and then it closed. What's going on here? And what it's going to do, it's going to be the first time that that dog is being forced to take a step back in a moment of strong, intense stimulus, and it's going to make them think for a minute. Then what you're going to do is you're going to open the door again. You're not going to say a word, and you're going to see what the dog does. They're probably going to try and rush through it again, but it's probably going to be slightly less intense. They try and rush through, you're going to close the door really firmly again. This time, you might start actually getting them sitting on their own. You didn't give a sit command, you didn't enforce it, but they're thinking, wow, that didn't work again, so I'm gonna try something else, and they're gonna organically start sitting. Each time you do that, and at each doorway that you do that through, you're gonna see the dog sit further and further and further away from the door. They're gonna start giving you more space. They're gonna start focusing more on you. They're gonna start automatically sitting on their own at doorways, and that's ultimately what we want. Why do we give a sit and wait command at doorways? We do it because we don't want them rushing through the doorway. If we're asking a sit and wait, we're not being as clear as we can about what it is that we want the dog to do or what we don't want them to do. In this case, rushing through the doorway. By not asking anything and by shutting the door very, very firmly on them when they start to rush through, you are 100% tackling the root of the problem, and that is rushing through the doorway. Don't let them rush through doorways and forget giving verbal commands. From there, you're going to get the dog thinking, you're going to get the dog paying more attention to you, and you're going to make it much more easy to manage them in between those doorways. Each dog is constantly fighting to get to the next stimulus, which is the next doorway, the next threshold, the next big exciting thing. So if you're creating less excitement at those, all of that in between, which is the walking, the leash walking in the shelter, it's going to get smoother. What's your most effective marketing technique other than word of mouth by Roxanne Lewis? There are two things that I directly correlate to all of Heights Canine's success. The first one, word of mouth. If you're doing good work, you're gonna get referrals. Every single time you engage with a customer, engage with them in a way where you're going above and beyond any of their expectations. Aside from that, there's a huge one that I just made a video about yesterday that you can go watch on my YouTube page. Facebook marketing. Facebook marketing is the single most underpriced form of marketing. You can target as specifically as you need to, and for not that much money, just like $100 even, $50, you could reach such a wide range of people within a geographical location. So in my case, all of my posts that I boost on the Heights page, I put within a 40-mile radius of our business. I put some good content on it. I put a couple $100 on it, and I reach a very, very broad range of people. I've recently raised my budget on Facebook advertising because I believe in it that strongly. I think it has really grown our business so much, like unbelievable amounts. I mean, every single week we're getting almost 200 new likes on our Facebook page due to the Facebook advertising. So that's been the biggest one. That's been our biggest source of leads, and that's one I stand the most strongly behind. I have a lot of tips on boosting posts, things like that I could tell you if you want to send me private messages, things like that. What's your protocol for resource guarding or when a dog grabs an object that they're not supposed to have? This is an easy one, but it's also not an easy one, and it's also kind of a two-part question. So resource guarding and dogs picking up random objects are two very, very different things. Resource guarding, in the sense of guarding a food bowl, is 9 times out of 10 a very, very, very insecure behavior. It comes from fearful dogs, it comes from nervous dogs, it comes from anxious dogs. Guarding random objects that are picked up in the house, to me, is a heavily over-adrenalized behavior. It's more of a entitled behavior. It's more of like a dickheadedy behavior from most dogs that I've seen. And though resource guarding food bowls can also be that, and though guarding objects in the house can also be anxiety driven, I see them separate very often. In the case of the food bowl, the biggest thing that I like to tell people is remove as much of the conflict as you can from the situation. I really don't believe that you can correct all aggression away. There's so many dog trainers on the internet that are so quick to say, punish it, punish it, punish it, punish it. Yes, that's true, but when you're talking about changing the emotional state of a dog, particularly when you're dealing with aggression over certain things, punishing it adds too much conflict sometimes. What do? I find a way to remove the conflict, correct very, very specific bad behaviors that I don't want, and also, helping to find a way to build the dog's confidence. So what I do is I take a dog, I put him on a leash, I get their food bowl, make the dog sit, make him wait, put the food bowl down, release the dog to go eat it, and 9 times out of 10, if I have a dog that resource guards a lot, they will not eat that food bowl at my feet. They're too stressed out of the fact that that food is already within my bubble. They are within my bubble right there, and it's too much pressure on them. They won't handle it. So what do a lot of people do? They'll leave the food there, they'll walk away, they'll let the dog eat it, and they'll work from a distance. I don't do that. I don't believe that I should adjust the way that I'm handling a dog in order to get them to start eating food or to work through aggressive behaviors. I need everything to stay as consistent as it's going to be once the dog is home for the most part. So I put the food away. The dog doesn't eat that meal, you know? So if they're too stressed out to eat it with it at my feet, I put it away. So then I try again the next meal time. I take the food bowl out, I take the dog out, I have the dog on leash, put the dog in a sit, put the food bowl down, release them to go eat it, and this time maybe they'll start eating, but typically they eat really, really slowly when they first start. They're stressed, they're concerned that I might be taking the food away from them, and I don't ask them to do anything. I don't do anything. I just stand there and I let them eat the food. I don't even really move around or anything. I want to kind of build their confidence that eating next to me is an okay thing. It's not horrible. So, you know, I'm letting the dog eat. If I start to see any sort of aggression, so what I mean by that is anything more than a very light grumble, I mark it with a no, I correct the behavior. That's it. I'm not asking a command or anything, I'm just letting them know that you can't show aggression towards me when I'm standing next to you. Typically that teaches the dog to just move away from you. So that's accomplishing what you want to when you're teaching an out command. Again, like I talked about earlier with the doorways, why do people teach out commands? They teach out commands because they want the dog to move away from the food bowl as opposed to show aggression. So how about I just teach the dog not to be aggressive around the food bowl? And that will naturally teach them to move away if there's too much stress and too much pressure and they feel like acting out. So with the food bowl, the dog will start eating. They typically eat pretty slowly initially. I'll typically do a couple days of that, assuming I don't see any aggression, until they're eating consistently well, they're eating comfortably, they're eating at a normal pace, and from there I start moving in circles around the dog. So as the dog's eating, I'm just walking a circle, I'm holding their leash still in case they were to do anything. At that point, if I see any aggression, again, anything more than a slight grumble. I will allow slight grumbles sometimes in resource guarding drills because, again, it's a conflicted feeling and I want to see where it goes from there. So if I get a light little grumble, I want to see, is there forward movement behind it or is there moving away from it? So typically, if you're getting a light grumble in resource guarding, if you stand there and you wait them out for a minute while they're grumbling, chances are they're going to stop eating and they're going to move away from you. They're going to realize that, wow, that grumbling didn't work. The problem is if you're correcting that grumbling, when you're doing resource guarding drills, it's reinforcing everything that they think, that you being next to that food bowl is a scary thing, that you being next to that food bowl means bad things are going to happen. So I'll allow it, I'll see where it goes. If I see forward movement, so if that light grumble goes from then I say no, I correct for it obviously because no forward movement is allowed. But if they retreat, they back away, that's what I want also, and that's reinforcing in itself. Them giving themselves space and them also realizing that that growling isn't working and what they're trying to accomplish, which is making me go away. That's stronger than a correction, honestly. That really, really is stronger than a correction to these dogs. So from there, I move to, moving circles around the dog, making sure they're cool. I do want to make sure that the dogs will tolerate being touched while eating. It's not something where I'm like petting the shit out of them while they're eating and needing to mess with them and stuff. I just need to know that if somebody brushes up against them or, scratches their butt or something like that in a situation, that they're not going to try and bite them. Same deal from there. I look for, do I see any growling? And if I do see any growling, do I see forward movement or do I see them moving away? I always want moving away. When you feel pressure, you shouldn't act on it. You should move away from it. What's a dog's response to pressure? Figure it out and address it accordingly and create what you want out of it. Helping them get over that stress by just organically teaching them, hey, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going to create a ton of pressure and put a bunch of stress on you, but I'm not going anywhere. You have to just tolerate it. A lot of people give up too soon because a lot of times the dogs won't eat initially. They may go a couple of meals without eating, and a lot of people in those cases will feed the dog somewhere else or something because they feel bad. Dogs aren't going to let themselves starve. It's as simple as that. They're not going to let themselves starve. If you're in a situation where the dog's going a couple of meals without eating, you're probably this close to really making that breakthrough, man. You're probably really, really, really close. So wait them out. Follow that protocol. As far as with socks and picking up random objects, so here's my take on that. Same deal. A lot of people want to teach a drop it or an out or whatever it may be. I look at this the same as people saying off when dogs are jumping on people. Off or drop it is intended for things that your dog is sometimes allowed to do. Off, I use with my dogs when they're on the couch hanging out with me and I want them to get off. They're sometimes allowed on the couch, but I just want them to get off temporarily. Off works as an interrupter. Same deal with drop it. Drop it I use when I'm playing chuck it with my dogs, or tug or something like that, where sometimes they're allowed to play and sometimes they're allowed to bite it, but I want them to temporarily stop it. It interrupts the behavior for a split second. When they're picking up random things in the house, if your dog is picking up socks and picking up Kleenex and picking up, I don't know, wrappers off the floor and stuff, we never want them to do those things. So why would we use a command that implies that sometimes you're allowed to do it? I use no exclusively for those things. I want to inhibit the dog from doing any of those behaviors. I don't want my dog to ever pick those things up. So I'm going to use a correction for it, no, and a punishment on a remote collar, knee collar, something like that. And I'm going to teach the dog to never pick those things up. 3 more questions I'm going to answer here. I'm going to sandwich 2 of them up because they're very, very similar and they're going to be easy responses. And I want to save one of these for last because it's a fantastic question that I have some strong opinions on and it's a little bit controversial. Just moved a month ago. Dog now peeing in the house daily, never went in old place. If behavioral, how do you modify? And then recommendations for potty training when your puppy is a low rider, aka wiener dog. Potty training is pretty darn easy, guys. You're giving your dog too much freedom if they're having potty training accidents. So a couple things. I'm willing to bet almost anything with both Christina and Christina. They're both Christina's that asked the question. So I'm willing to bet both of you guys that your dogs are having accidents out of your sight. So they're sneaking off behind the couch to go to the bathroom. They are sneaking into another room to go to the bathroom. They have a spot somewhere, this and that. Cool. You got to take away their freedom. They're not allowed to go in those places. Dog needs to be within eyesight at all times. If you need to keep a leash on your dog to ensure that they're staying within eyesight, you got to do that. Potty training, you just have to build a history of success. Every single time your dog goes in the house, it's reinforcing that's something that they do. This isn't something that you need to punish or anything like that. It really does come down to the dog just needs less freedom. They don't think that they're doing anything wrong. They're able to do it. They go in the other room and nothing happens. And if you go and yell at them later, they don't know what they're getting yelled at for. They don't understand that it's for having an accident in the other room. So take away that freedom. I'm now 3 glasses of wine in. I'm feeling pretty good and I'm ready to tackle this question. Juliet Grace. If there's a dog at a shelter that is aggressive, has bit, and is aggressive towards dogs, should that dog be euthanized or put up for adoption in a home where there are no children or pets? There is 2 answers to this question because reading it back again now, I'm a little unclear on what specifically you're asking. 2 big things: dog aggression, human aggression. If you have a dog that is dog aggressive, let's say they can't be around other dogs, they try and attack other dogs, that's pretty manageable. I would say most dogs that I know, whether it's friends' dogs or dogs that have come into my facility initially or whatever it may be, have dog aggression issues. They don't like other dogs. They get in other fights. They try and go after other dogs, things like that. That's not the end of the world, guys. Honestly, Vinny, my Malinois, where is he? He's right here. Vinny's not a big fan of other dogs. He doesn't go and attack other dogs and stuff, but he doesn't like other dogs. So guess what? He's never around other dogs. It's as simple as that. I don't take him to people's houses that I know have dogs, even though they ask me to. And I don't take him to dog parks because, well, 1, I think dog parks are stupid. But 2, he doesn't want to be there. And 3, he's rarely around other dogs. I mean, we're at the facility right now. We have 10 dogs downstairs, and he hasn't said hi to any of them. He just doesn't like being around other dogs. He doesn't like other dogs pushing him, so who cares? I keep him away from other dogs. That's pretty straightforward, you know? Dog aggression is something where I feel like everybody has this feeling where personally, they have to have their dog playing with other dogs all the time. They always want to take their dogs to the dog park and to their friend's house and stuff like that. And it's just not necessary. It's for them more than it is for the dog. They want to see their dog playing with other dogs because they think it's cute. They think it's fun. They think the dog is enjoying themselves. But secretly, it gives them gratification knowing that their dog is interacting with their friends' dogs. It helps give them and their friends something to talk about, something to, say, oh, our dogs are playmates and stuff like that. But it's not necessary. Who cares? You got a dog with dog aggression issues. Don't take them around other dogs. Plain and simple. Now, that goes to the other side of the spectrum, human aggression. This is very, very different. This is dangerous. You can't keep your dogs away from people. You're going to inevitably have guests come over your house all the time, especially when we're working with dogs that are in a shelter that have human aggression issues, especially the ones that have bitten before, that is a serious thing. We're talking dogs that are trying to harm people. It's different when it's another species. We can control our dog's environment enough where we can keep them away from dogs. We can't do that with people. There inevitably will be people that are going to be around your dog at some point in time. And unfortunately, all the training in the world doesn't guarantee that your dog is going to be safe around people. Anybody that's ever owned a dog that has human aggression issues, or even dog aggression issues that they've tried to work through, know just how much work it is to keep your dog in a manageable place and keep them safe around people. I mean, we're talking like a lot of work. It takes so much work that people don't even realize it. And especially when it's a dog that you're talking about adopting out, because they don't even know the people that are going to be adopting them. You know, they're going to try and bite them. They're going to act aggressively towards them. I always say people don't go to shelters with the thought of adopting a dog that is going to be trying to bite people. And if they do, frankly, I think they're full of shit. I think that they don't know what they're getting themselves into. It's so much work you don't even understand. And especially when you start talking about the liability of it. There's so much liability to adopting out aggressive dogs or to owning an aggressive dog. And it's a conversation that I have with every single client that comes in here that has a dog with human aggression issues that they want to get training for. I have very, very real conversations about how much work it's going to take for them, as well as how you know, there's no guarantees for it. They're dogs. You know, unfortunately, they're always going to have their quirks. They're always going to be a little weird, and they're never going to be 100% safe around people. I think that, frankly, people don't understand what they're getting into when they talk about rehabilitating aggressive dogs or adopting a dog that needs heavy rehabilitation. A lot of people think it sounds cool to be able to say, oh, I rehabilitated my dog, without realizing how much work it is. So I think that dogs with dog aggression issues at the shelter can be adopted out. I think that the people just need to realize, hey, you can't have your dog around other dogs. Plain and simple. Find a trainer. They'll help you socialize them a little bit more if you really, really want to do it, but that's not that big of a deal. Dogs with human aggression issues in shelters, I don't think that they're safe to be adopted out. I think that if you find a dog trainer that is interested in taking them on as project dogs, I think that that's a different story. But I think that if that trainer tries to adopt them out at that point, I think that that is a little unethical at that point. I've done it before. I've worked with them before. I don't regret doing it in the past, but it's not something that I'm really interested in doing again. It's a ton of liability, guys. It really, really is. And I think that puts shelters in a little bit of a tricky spot. You know, it's hard. It's really hard. I don't have other words for it, and it sucks to be able to have those conversations, but you got to be able to remove the emotional element from it and understand that, cool, if you find a trainer to work with this dog, even if they're going to keep it, the amount of money that you're going to dump into getting that dog rehabilitated can help so many more dogs find homes where you can guarantee lasting. You can't guarantee it, but where you could really, really have a lot more of a shot at helping them out in those situations. That's kind of my opinion on that. It's definitely not the funnest one. I'm not happy about it. I wish that you could save all dogs the way that a lot of people think that you can, but unfortunately you can't. So that's kind of that, I think. So with that, I think, Jesus Christ, I think I filmed like an hour worth of stuff here. So I'm going to finish drinking this glass of wine here. I'm going to edit this video. I'm going to put it on YouTube, and you guys are going to tell me what you think. What do you think, Vinny and Vera? Oh.